You know, it's really great when you have good roots. And so the new college is very grateful to the Teachers College for the fine roots that it has given us. I would like to welcome to the podium Roger Breed, who is the Commissioner-elect for the Nebraska Department of Education, and he is currently the Superintendent of Elkhorn Schools. When I called him, not so long ago, when we were in the midst of some challenging conversation. And I can still remember saying to him, "You can say no if you want to." And he said absolutely not. That he was delighted to come and to welcome people to this celebration. You need to know that Roger is an alumnus of the college, Teachers College. And he told us, nothing is good, a flexible bunch. But he is our graduate, more than one time over. And last year, Roger, we were very proud that you were honored at the Big Red Gala in Omaha for your wonderful contributions to education. So we're very excited that you're here, and we're happy that you will help to launch this part of our program. So please join me in welcoming Roger Breed.
Thank you, Dean. I had just reworked my comments with the rap beat, but it just won't work down here. So I'm not sure what I'll do. I also would like to express my thanks for two things already today. And in this presentation, one is that my picture did not appear on the slides. I was very worried when we hit the 60s. And the second thing is, for the most part, I have gotten rid of my bell-bottom jeans. Well, welcome to the College of Education and Human Sciences Founders Day dinner. I am honored and privileged to be here with you in celebration of 100 years of innovation in education. My journey with the UNL Teachers College began in 1968, interesting time, when as a sophomore I was accepted into the college and began a program to become a social sciences teacher. I have since earned a master's, education doctorate, and completed postdoctoral study, all at UNL. Yes, I paid enough tuition to build a building. I have spent my entire career working in the Nebraska public schools as a teacher, coach, superintendent, principal, and beginning March 30th, 2009, as Nebraska Commissioner of Education. Now, the March 30th date is key because it's not 2 days later. The state board and I felt that starting on April 1st was not a good thing. The people in my district said, "Why not?" I'm proud to say that without exception, each and every day, the lessons, the ideas, and the education innovations that I experienced at UNL have guided my work in Nebraska schools. I would attempt to name the dozens of educators that contributed to my development, first as a teacher, and then later supported my transition and growth as a school administrator for the past 40 years. But I'm afraid I would leave someone out, so suffice it to say, thanks to one and all who have worked in the College of Education and Human Sciences, the Teachers College previous to 2003. Your efforts have truly touched the lives of thousands of Nebraska students over the years, including me. 100 years. What was it like 100 years ago? When the college was first organized, and began to prepare students to be the teachers and administrators of the state and the region. In context, 100 years ago, Theodore Roosevelt was our president and was just completing his second term. One of his last acts as president was to designate the Grand Canyon as a national park. That will not help you, by the way, on one of the questions. Roosevelt's Secretary of Defense, William Howard Taft, was elected president in November of 2008. Very significant election, or in November of 1908. A very significant election, just as the one we had just a few weeks ago here. Who did he defeat?
William Jennings Bryan.
William Jennings Bryan, a resident of Lincoln, Nebraska. Very good. Give that man another champagne. Defeated William Jennings Bryan, a resident of this city. In 1908, the first electric typewriter was invented, and it would take decades before electric typewriters would replace the manual ones. In fact, when I started at UNL, I was a journalism student. I've apologized for that many times. I've been punished for even thinking about being a journalist by my interactions with journalists quite frequently over the past couple of decades. But are there any journalists here? Any lawyers? I have to apologize. My son is a lawyer, and I was going to be a journalist. And if they had electric typewriters, I might very well have ended up as a journalist. But in the late 60s, when I entered UNL as a journalism student, they were still standard typewriters, manual typewriters. And with these rather uncoordinated hands, I could not type very quickly. If I would have short stroke keyboards like we do today, I might be the person the superintendents hate. Also, General Electric in 1908 introduced one of my favorite appliances, the electric toaster. Cost? $1.45. I wish my wife would have recognized it. We moved to a new house, had a perfectly good toaster, but it didn't look good on the counter. She paid more than $1.45 for a new toaster. And a final example of life in 1908, a corporation much in the news today, General Motors, was founded by W.C. Durant to compete with Ford. Ford in 1908 was the world leader in producing and selling cars. Its Model T was #1, selling for $850. A very different time in many ways, and yet a very similar effort was needed to prepare students in 1908 as there is in 2008 to become the necessary education leaders to go across the region and prepare the next generation of students. I would like to leave you with a poem that I think captures the mission and the success of Teachers College over the past 100 years. The language of the poem is dated, and I have modified the ending, but I think the poem somewhat eloquently speaks to why we are here tonight. I dispel the tempest of ignorance which threatens calamity to the community and the nation. I provide the laboratories, the libraries, the classrooms, wherein the scientists, the statesmen, the ministers, and teachers of tomorrow may find their strength. I build the bulwarks. How many times have you used bulwarks in your conversation this week? Which tend to ford the tides of time. I shape the key to intelligent public opinion, which unlocks the doors to economic, political, and social stability. I yield returns more precious than gold, more lasting than steel, more potent than the sword or the pen, the returns of intelligent, thinking minds. I ensure the rights of childhood. I am the UNL Teachers College, now the College of Education and Human Services. The author of the poem is unknown, and the language old, but the message is crystal clear. 100 years of education, innovation, have paid great dividends, and I count myself as a very, very fortunate recipient and very fortunate to be associated with the UNL College of Education and Human Sciences. Again, welcome to all of you, and thank you for your attendance tonight and your attention.
Thank you, Roger, very much. Now we'd like to hear from Molly Tesson. And Molly is the president of Phi Lambda Theta, which is the honorary, which is the education honorary. And she is also a member of our student advisory board. So please join me in welcoming Molly.
Recently, I watched my cooking cadets graduate from ingredients cooking class. I realized the parallels between cooking and teaching, and more importantly, came to a realization how this recent job influenced my passion and determination to become a teacher. This past summer, I had a job at Ingredients as a cooking teacher for young children. We made fun recipes like crazy noodles and scrumptious chocolate brownies. The children loved getting their hands dirty, and the feeling of accomplishment at the end of the day made them impatient for the next class to begin. Each child must complete a set of classes in order to get their chef hat and graduate. This final graduation is what the students work for throughout all of their classes. When this day finally came, the students' energized behavior, the look of triumph on their faces made my heart leap. All of the hard work they put into their recipes this summer finally paid off. All of the Saturday and Sunday mornings of loud music and messy situations suddenly became completely worth it. My realization started when one of my students made her first apple pie. She was struggling tremendously with following directions and was on the verge of giving up. I comforted her and helped her finish the project. I was not prepared for the result, which to me would be memorable. When she opened the oven to see her apple pie, she screamed with joy. She turned to me and gave me a big hug, thanking me for helping her. Her sparkling eyes and missing tooth smile made me become conscious of the impact teachers make on their students. Because of this experience, I think of teaching as an immense cookbook, full of different recipes that will hopefully bring a smile, like my little chefs, back to each and every one of my students. I often relate teaching to cooking. Projects and assignments in the classroom are thrown into a big mixing bowl, ready to be created into something fresh and out of the ordinary. There were a variety of children in my class. When it comes to teaching, we are constantly being faced with all kinds of students, environments, and situations, all of which require a different recipe for success. In my opinion, there are 3 ingredients necessary to be a successful educator: compassion, the ability to be positively interact with students, and an eagerness to be a lifelong learner. I see compassion as the #1 ingredient I would incorporate in my recipe for successful teaching. I have had many wonderful teachers in the past that showed me the meaning of compassion every day in their classroom. Looking back at my elementary school years, my compassion and commitment for myself and the rest of the students' well-being is something I hope to pass on to my future students. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Harold, taught me what it means to be dedicated to my students' success. Mrs. Harold spent hours designing a rainforest to help us remember all of the animals in this environment. This rainforest was amazing, colorful, and complete. To this day, I still remember that you can find the red-eyed tree frog buried deep under the leaves where it makes its home to reproduce. Did you know the red tree frog stays with its tadpoles in the water until they grow up? I would not remember these details if it weren't for Mrs. Harold's dedication. Compassion may lie in something as simple as stickers, stars, and words of praise. It may be the encouragement that brings a smile to their face after their homework is returned. Compassion may also lie in that extra hour of school you commit to a student reteaching a lesson or a concept they couldn't quite grasp. Compassion may lie in that hug and smile each student receives as they leave the classroom each day. Positive interaction is the 2nd ingredient that I believe to be very vital for a successful teacher. During my practicum, I was excited to see my kids, to get the chance to interact with them again. Liking kids is one thing, but truly caring about their well-being and knowledge is another. Their success is something I will pride myself on being a part of. In my most recent practicum, I was in a 2nd grade classroom. I found that being positive about everything is important. It shaped the relationship between myself and the students, student-to-student relationships, and even the atmosphere of the classroom. For example, there was a student who was requested to spend an hour each day with the reading specialist. He was upset he was taken away from the class and felt as though it was a punishment. Because I wanted him to realize what a great opportunity this was and to keep his spirits high, I accompanied him to one of his sessions. Not only did I significantly benefit by seeing a more specialized resource in action, but I aided him in pointing out the positive in his extra hour of reading each day. He began to enjoy his time with the reading specialist, and I believe he still has a positive outlook on the extra help he received. Adding to these amazing ingredients, my eagerness to teach and the interest in continually learning about my profession will allow me greater flexibility in my teaching methods. Just as cooking requires some test runs and redos and experimentation, that stands true in the classroom as well. As a student myself, I was eager to learn, and my goal for this career is to pass eagerness to learn onto each and every one of my students. As I think about the previous graduates from Teachers College here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, as well as all of the past professors and administrators who have guided us to success, I can imagine what recipes they've contributed. Now in 2008, it is my time for my contribution as a member of this college. My ingredients include the College of Education and Human Sciences Student Advisory Board, where we have most recently compiled a survey to gather the opinions of our fellow classmates. And as president of Pi Lambda Theta, my goal is to increase membership and raise awareness of this honorary association. So what is my most recent recipe? Why do I want to teach? To ignite the spark of curiosity in children, to share my love of learning with young minds and help students discover their potential, to make the same kind of difference in a child's life as your favorite teacher made in yours, and to turn my love of learning into a love of teaching. Thank you.
As you can see, Molly is a wonderful representative of the 2,700 undergraduate students in the college and the 1,100 graduate students. I am now very pleased to invite Dean Emeritus Jim O'Hanlon to come and talk a little bit about his memories of Teachers College.
Thank you. I think moving down here reminded me of when we moved from the open classroom back to the regular classroom. The same sort of a deal. Roger, thank you for your comments. And, we appreciate you being here tonight and you taking on the job of commissioner. You know, you do a great job for the children and youth of our state. And Molly, if I hadn't had such a good meal, your description of food there would have made me pretty hungry. But thank you also for your great description of what a teacher is. I want to thank you all for being here tonight and being part of this celebration, because what really gave Teachers College its meaning was the people that chose to associate with it. The students, the faculty, the staff, the colleagues and friends. They were the ones who made the college what it was. Some people have suggested that I was here when the college was founded. This is not true. However, my mother was a 1928 graduate of Teachers College, and so probably somewhere in the genes something about the early college was passed along. I think from the very beginning and throughout the whole 100 years, there were certain kinds of qualities or characteristics were kind of hallmarks of the college. And one of those was that it always aimed to meet the needs of the state. And in fact, that's why the college was formed. If you go back and look at the statements at the time of the forming of the college, it was about how the university ought to do something to help prepare, and that, first of all, secondary teachers in the state, and then very quickly thereafter, elementary teachers and administrators. And so whatever decade you look at, in Jenny's nice presentation we saw upstairs, why there are some special things that were done to meet the needs at that time. For example, during the Depression, the college provided a lot of materials to schools in the state, so they would have ample curriculum materials for their students. It led the way in establishing certification of teachers and administrators in the state so that everyone would be assured of having a quality, well-prepared teacher. After World War II, when elementary and secondary schools population just increased so rapidly as a result of the baby boom after the war, why the college put all its resources into preparing more teachers. Faculty taught extra classes, larger classes, worked in the summer as well as during the year to ensure that there would be an ample supply of teachers for the state. Our outreach programs have always focused on the special needs of that particular time that schools in the state had. And whatever decade you look at, I think you'll find that the character of what the college was doing was shaped by what the schools, the elementary and secondary schools in the state needed. I think the second feature that was true throughout was the emphasis on teaching. Now, it always seemed to me to be kind of a no-brainer that a teacher's college would emphasize teaching. But as we began to hire faculty from other universities, it always kind of surprised me, but it wasn't long before they would say to me something like, you know, I'm really glad I'm here because here I really get to teach and I get support to teach, and teaching support wasn't that way where I was before. And so we've always tried to provide the support and structure and the recognition and the rewards for people as teachers. I think from the very beginning, the college has tried to be a really good partner with K-12 schools, partner with the Department of Education, with education organizations in the state, and with everybody who is working to ensure that children and youth have a great educational experience. And finally, I think we've always tried to be a leader within the university. We were one of the first colleges, or maybe the first college, to work to diversify our student body and our faculty. The first to really set up a strong instructional technology support system. The first to do distance education, which was just a natural outgrowth. In the early years, distance education was a faculty member got on the train and went out to Cook or someplace and taught class, and then took the train back the next day. And then after a while, you took your car, and now, of course, you go through online methods to provide the outreach. But within the university, we led in distance ed. We were first to form a business center to support the work of the college, and some of our business policies and staff policies were adopted by the whole university. At the 50th anniversary celebration of the college, Professor Herb Goldenstein spoke, and he talked about how the faculty then and the students then were standing on the shoulders of the giants that people who had come before them who had established the college in the first 50 years. Well, if they were standing on the shoulders of giants then, why we really are today, because we understand that the college was formed long before we got here, and that the work of the faculty and the staff throughout the years, and the wonderful work that our graduates have done after leaving the college is what's made the college great. And I think looking at our graduates and the tremendous contributions they've made, I think we can feel the college did its work well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, very, very much. Well, we're now in for a very special treat. We've heard three perspectives about Teachers College. We've heard from a graduate, we've heard from an aspiring graduate, and we've heard from a very gracious leader. And now we are about to hear something a little different. There was a committee that did all of the work for the centennial. And as you know, we began on Valentine's Day of this year. And between Valentine's Day and this evening, we've had almost 5,000 people participate in some facet of the celebration of Teachers College. And the goal of that committee was that we would have many audiences: students, faculty, staff, alumni, emeriti, schools, our stakeholders, and the people of Nebraska. With that in mind, we commissioned Pippa White to create a one-person show or one-person performance that would be a tribute to teachers. Now, for those of you who have seen Pippa perform in the past, you know that she is really wonderfully talented at taking much historical information but giving it a voice, a personal voice that touches the heart as well as the intellect. She is, the name of her company is the One's Company Productions, and she's toured really more than half of the states. She has a bachelor's degree in English from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and she offers workshops and residencies, and she's been teaching artists with the Arts, our basic program, and the Nebraska Arts Council for 17 years. If you've never seen her perform before, you are in for a wonderful treat. And if you have seen her perform, then you know that you're in for a wonderful treat. I would like to thank Pippa ahead of time for taking this on. She began way at the beginning of the summer, and we fed her tons of stuff, and she looked up a lot of things herself. This is sponsored by the 1908 Club of Teachers College. The 1908 Club was formed in 1998 at the 90th anniversary as a way to, it was actually initially started with very broad goals, but we have narrowed those goals in the past year to focus on the heritage of the college, which will include Teachers College, but and the College of Education and Human Sciences as well. All it takes to belong is $1,908 paid through the foundation to move toward the goal of preserving our heritage. We are very grateful to both Pippa White, to the Centennial Committee, who really has planned the whole host of things that we have done, and to the 1908 Club. It is our hope that when this is the premiere, so you're at a premiere. How many of you have ever been at a premiere before? You're at a premiere tonight, but we intend to give this production to the state of Nebraska so that others can also enjoy and understand the tribute to teachers and the importance of teachers. So part of our goal was not simply to have a celebration, but just as we have teachers and educational leaders who have impacted people's lives, we wanted to give something to the state that would go beyond this evening. And so our gift to the state of Nebraska is a tribute to teachers, which you will now see. Please join me in welcoming Pippa White.
I appreciate that very warm introduction, and I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted not to have the loud music. Thank you for having me. Oops, hold on here. Okay. I got my baptism by fire about 16 years ago when I first started teaching. I was working as a sub at an inner city school, and I hadn't been there 2 months when I got pushed down a flight of stairs. But I grabbed onto the railing and flipped over to the landing like a commando. I wasn't even hurt. I was young, physically fit, turned around, everyone was running in different directions. I never knew who did it, and I didn't even report it. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. A week later, it was Halloween. I was standing at the board writing when the door was pushed open and I was bombarded with eggs. Yellow egg yolk dripping all over me. Kids laughing, pointing, hooting, hollering. That time I didn't know what to do. I froze, waiting for the bell to ring. And because I was a sub, not much was done about it. But by the time I was full-time, there was another incident. I had a rule that you couldn't come late to my class. Well, this girl arrived about 20 minutes late, so I wouldn't let her in. So she began pounding and pounding at the door. Finally, I opened the door, I told her that she could not disturb the rest of the class, and she spat in my face. So I reported her to the dean. Next day, another teacher overheard this girl say in the hall to another student, "Look in my bag. This is for Clearmont." what was in the bag was a meat cleaver. So that time the school took action. She was expelled, arrested, and I never heard of her again. Okay, not a very pretty story to start with, I know. But I do so for a reason. And the reason is, I think that teachers have great courage. And I don't think that most people realize that. I think that if you asked a person on the street to name a few professions that require courage, you'd get firefighter, police work, emergency room, that kind of thing. I don't think you teachers would be at the top of anybody's list, but you should be there because you have great courage, and not just because you sometimes risk violence. I think you face situations all the time that require quick thinking, bravery, and action. My biggest scare happened one noontime when the children were eager to finish eating their lunches and run outside to play. Garland Miller, a small boy for his age, 6th grade, stuffed the last piece of his mother's chocolate cake into his mouth and ran outside. I was leaving with the children when several came running back to me saying, "Garland, Garland!" I went out and there was Garland writhing on the ground, holding his throat. It took me only a few seconds to realize he was choking. I reached into his mouth and tried to pull out the big, black, gummy ball of what had once been cake, but it was wedged fast. It was a solid mass. I yanked him up and began hitting him on the back, hard as I could, but to no avail. Oh my God, he was turning blue. There was no time to go for help, so I just picked him up by his ankles. I told you he wasn't a big boy, and I shook him. Oh, I shook him like a dog shakes a rat. That big ball of cake flew out of his mouth, and at the same time you could hear this big whooshing sound as fresh air raced into his lungs. I turned him upright, and you could see the color coming back into his face. Well, for the rest of the day, he was a quiet little boy. Didn't play, didn't laugh. He was one spent little person. And so was I. And you have great courage because when you work with kids, you never really know what to expect next. There were about 30 students in my little one-room country schoolhouse. Oops. The boys liked to play next to an old shed on the edge of the school ground. They found that if they stuck a pole under the shed and then put a rock under the pole to act as a fulcrum, if they all pushed down on this end of the pole, they could lift up the side of the shed. They would push and push as hard as they could, see how high they could get it. Then the leader would count to 3. They'd all let go and the shed would come down with a whoosh and a bang. They spent many a recess rearranging the pole, rearranging the fulcrum, trying to get the shed as high as they could. Well, all right, I suppose I was remiss. But at the time, it just kept them occupied, not bickering or complaining. And then one day, some wise guys got an idea. They would play a joke on one of the members of the group. They decided that they would all let go on the count of 2 instead of 3, leaving Raymond alone on the pole. Well, it worked much better than they could have anticipated. I had just stepped into the school to get a wrap, and as I came out, I saw one of my students flying through the air. Literally, the force of being alone on that pole had sent Raymond zooming over the roof of the shed. Oh, we all ran to the other side of the shed. Would he be dead? Would every bone in his body be broken? He was all right. I was bruised and scratched, but all right. That was one group of very worried boys. So that's my story of the boy in orbit, and that was that with the shed. And you are courageous and dedicated. And dedicated, I know, because teachers don't get paid enough, and you still do it. And you're dedicated because people often like to tell teachers how to do their job, don't they? And you have to listen, and you listen, and you still do it. And you're dedicated because even in the best of circumstances, you face tremendous challenges. So we're here today to celebrate 100 years of Teachers College at UNL, and we will do so with several courageous educators, past and present. Oh, it happened on some service assignment at some county institute in northeastern Nebraska. I was holding forth when I was accosted by an older man in the audience. He began shouting at me, saying, "You get out of here! You get out of here right now! We don't want any commies in our community teaching all that commie stuff like new math. You get out of here right now!" I walked to the center of the stage and I said, "Now hold on a minute. I served for 3.5 years as a captain in the United States Marines in World War II. Would you care to repeat that?" Meet Dorcas Cavett. Oh, I had serious misgivings about ever coming to the University of Nebraska. Serious misgivings about being chair of the women's PE department. And I enumerated them to the chancellor. Outmoded professional courses, lack of control by a woman recognized as actual head over women's work, women subservient to men, incompetent to be heads over women's work, too many part-time teachers on the staff and not enough full-time, staff members ill-prepared for their positions, staff members not loyal to the department or to one another, not cooperating, all professional courses taught by only 2 teachers, neither of whom demanded the respect of their students. For the average student at UNL, an outmoded and inadequate program, facilities entirely too limited, women students so unhappy with their second-class treatment in one gymnasium that they were begging for a building of their own. A serious case of provincialism, which is a detriment to any academic training. Failure to keep abreast of the times. Well, I felt that the chancellor should know how I felt before I agreed to come here. Meet Mabel Lee. I once had a student who wouldn't talk, didn't say a word. He had a very bad home environment, and I never got a word out of him. But every morning I'd say, "Hi, how are you today?" Nothing. But I just kept talking to him, just chattering and chattering away, and I never mentioned the fact that he didn't talk to me. And then one day, he started singing. That child owns my heart. He owns my heart because he's rambunctious and we go toe-to-toe, and he comes from such an unstructured home environment. It's a miracle he doesn't go bananas any day, but I'm seeing such progress in him, such growth. I feel like I'm making a difference. He won't talk to everybody. If I take him to the nurse because he's sick, he won't talk to her. But he is talking to me, he's talking to a few friends, and we can only hope that it's going to continue to go in this direction. And that's all you can do, isn't it? You just try your best. You just keep on trying your best and trying to make school as warm and comforting and structured as possible. Meet you. Okay? I have 3 stars today. Dorcas, Mabel, another famous Nebraska teacher whom you will meet at the end of this little presentation, and you. When I come over here, this is my supporting cast. You're my supporting cast. Dorcas. Early in my career, I made it a point to follow the precepts of progressive education and to keep my students aroused and motivated. Ralph Borsodi, an economist, I think it was, said that the main goal of an elementary school teacher was to wind children up, to get them so curious about their world that they would never run down. I believe that. I spent my first 2 years teaching in small schools in western Nebraska, but for my 3rd year, I accepted a position in Des Moines public schools. 66 6th graders, all underprivileged. Well, I'd learned by this time that you had to feel out your class. You had to find out what their talents, interests, and abilities were. You fit the curriculum to the child, not the other way around. I've always endorsed that principle. So on the first day of school, I asked them what they would like to study. The overwhelming response was nothing. And then one boy blurted out, "Well, I'm interested in gold." "Yeah," several others said, "gold." Well, I knew it was a smart aleck remark, But we launched into an all-consuming, completely integrated unit on gold. We had all our activities and subjects related to this main topic. We read all levels and kinds of materials. We went on field trips. We wrote letters asking for more information. We kept records. I was following the principles of Ralph Borsodi with this huge class of indifferent learners, and I won them. But I had to keep them even after the unit on gold. I took them to the General Electric traveling exhibit on the world of the future. I took them out into the country where they could see two rivers come together and better understand the principle of confluence. I took them out into the country so they could see ducks migrating, hear the frogs, listen and see changing sun and wind patterns. I took them to a farm. Would you believe that not one of my 66 sixth graders living in the heart of Iowa had ever been to a farm? And when the state fair was in town, I brought a baby elephant to class. I have never seen kids so turned on. I mean, they were fired up. We wrote stories, songs, poems about elephants. We created our own arithmetic problems. I got more geography in that unit than in any other. We read everything we could about elephants. I didn't think they'd ever run down. Well, as the year wound to a close, I began to relax. I had survived. One day I went to the bank to get my check, and I found a letter inside the envelope. It said, "My dear Miss Crawford," I was not yet married, "I enclose a contract for next year without an increase of salary. This represents the attitude of those who know your work best, that it has not been satisfactory. But at the same time, you deserve a further chance in our system. There is considerable doubt that you will succeed in making a permanent place for yourself in this system unless you find it possible very greatly to improve your work." I was devastated. I was devastated. I went back to my room and cried. And then I got mad. I got on my bike and I rode to the superintendent's office. He greeted me very kindly, ushered me into his office, asked me what was on my mind. I said I didn't know how to very greatly improve my work. Well, it turned out that many teachers in the Des Moines public school system had received the same letter. That way, they did not have to offer a raise. It was the Depression. We were all teaching double classroom loads as it was to cut costs. But I learned a thing or two, and I must tell you, it was not the first time that my teaching was called into question. Stubborn. They are calling me stubborn. I hadn't been at the University of Nebraska 5 minutes when at my first staff meeting, I was informed that I must quickly learn which girls were the members of sororities and to what groups they belonged. Why? I asked in innocence. Well, they told me that if we gave poor grades to the girls in the sororities, not only would we have to deal with the sorority, we would also have to deal with the alums, who were always very eager to keep the scholarship rating of their group high. What about the non-sorority girls? I asked. Oh, it was all right to give them poor grades. And an occasional poor grade to a girl in a sorority, but never the girls in the 4 or 5 top groups. I let it be known right then and there at that first staff meeting that we were all going to bend over backwards not to know the sorority affiliations of our students, and what a price I paid for that stand. How many visits I had in my office, I cannot tell you, from irate alums, irate parents, irate teachers from other departments, irate community leaders, all berating me roundly for ruining a sorority's scholarship rating. All this for doing what was right and honest and just. It took me a long time to educate people to the fact that we do not give grades. Students earn them. Well, not everyone was educated to this fact. Oh, there were some who accepted this change of philosophy with good grace, but there were others who never forgave me. or not kowtowing to their whims. Stubborn. My 10th grade English teacher was remarkable. I don't think I ever learned so much. And it wasn't facts. What I learned were life lessons. Mr. Haskin would assign us a famous novel or a Shakespeare play. When it came time to discuss it, he would come to class dressed as one of the characters from the play or novel. I remember once he came dressed as Falstaff, you know, the fat guy from Henry IV. Another time he was dressed as Captain Ahab from Moby Dick, walking around with a harpoon in his hand. He'd quote a line, and then he'd ask us to discuss what that meant, both to the character and to the whole story. I mean, he brought those plays and books alive. To this day, no one can say Hamlet to me without me seeing Mr. Haskin walking around in class in this funny costume with a skull in his hand. He did the to be or not to be speech. We talked about what that meant forever. And my 8th grade American history teacher, Mrs. Dietz, was so excited about her subject that it was impossible to leave that class not similarly excited. Her love of our country's history was evident in that classroom every single day. She loved to talk about the Federalist Papers and the division between those who wanted states' rights and those who wanted a more centralized government. I mean, this was heady stuff for 8th grade, but it was her passion for that subject that made such an impression on me. And it's why I teach high school history today. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't be a teacher. No, with all the opportunities there are for women now, no, I'd be an engineer or a city planner. Why? Because I don't like kids. Okay, now when I say I don't like kids, what I mean is the only reason for me to be in a classroom is to teach. I love teaching. I love teaching. I love imparting knowledge. I love enabling someone to know something that they didn't know before. It's problem solving. And when I say I don't like kids, what I mean is I'm not motivated by some maternal instinct, some nurturing instinct, but I have great respect for my students, great respect. I admire how they struggle, and I admire their willingness to struggle. I tell them, we all have jobs. When you grow up, you're going to have a job. Right now, this is your job. After 3 happy years in the Lincoln Public School District, I returned to my classroom a few days after school had dismissed for the summer to find the door locked and all my belongings outside the door. I went to the office to ask what was going on, and I was informed that I was no longer needed. I had been a disruptive teacher. You see, I told you it wasn't the only time my teaching was called into question. A disruptive teacher. And you know, I suppose I had been. I refused to keep a penalty book on the playground. I questioned the propriety of certain rules and regulations, and I didn't use textbooks and workbooks exclusively. I used them often, frequently, and I knew they had value. I just did not use them exclusively. So I was a disruptive teacher and fired. I went home, and this time I did not cry. A few hours later, I got a call from the principal of Bancroft Elementary School, the university's lab school where young teachers can observe the practice of teaching. She had heard of my dismissal and wanted me to join her at Bancroft. And what a wonderful 16 years I had. Taught all year long, taught every summer session. One summer, I had to teach about fractions, and my husband thought that it might be a good idea to use the stock market to teach about fractions. So I developed a unit called Don't Lose Your Shirt. On the first day of school, everyone got a check for $10,000. We had 1 week to read everything we could about the stock market, and then they had to invest their money wisely. I gave them only one piece of advice: don't put all your eggs in one basket. I taught them how to read the Wall Street Journal, and they became so adept at it that many of them would stop at the Cornhusker Hotel on their way to school, buy the paper, so that when the guests came down to get a copy, they were sold out. We took field trips to brokerage firms. We made a three-dimensional mural of Wall Street. We talked bull and bear markets, common and preferred stocks, Dow Jones averages. I took them on field trips to several industries so that they could better understand the relationship between industry and capital. We bought and sold and figured brokerage fees. Every child kept a graph of the progress of his or her own stock. They began arriving at school before I got there. So, by this time I felt I had achieved the ultimate in the teaching experience. School started on its own, gained momentum, flowed right along. It was great. Uproars. Uproars. Not only am I stubborn, but everything I do and say seems to lead to an uproar. The gymnasium costumes that my women students are wearing, outrageous, cannot be seen outside the building in those disgraceful costumes. Uproar. My dancers have danced barefoot. Uproar. A certain English teacher tried to get me fired. Uproar. Oh, and then there was the KKK. Yes, the Ku Klux Klan right here in Lincoln. I asked the university purchasing agent to call for bids from local merchants with the idea towards giving the order for the women's outrageous gymnasium costumes to the lowest bidder. When that firm was chosen, I began to get pressure from the other merchants, telling me I really should give the order to all of them when they had all had a chance to make a bid. Well, I was told that the chosen firm was Catholic. And if I didn't want the KKK breathing down my neck, I had better not swing university business to that firm. Well, nothing was going to make me back down for a reason like that. And hear from the KKK I did. Harassing letters, threatening telephone calls, even to my poor mother, all trying to discredit me. Went on for quite a few unpleasant months, and then it went away. But I can still remember a cross burning on the lawn of the old country club when it was out on 37th Street. Still sends chills up my spine. What gets me real excited is when you're in a grocery store or something, and some kid hollers, "Mr. Vernon," and comes over and gives you a big hug, right there in the middle of the grocery store. Everyone's wondering what's going on, but he's proud of himself. He's making it in life, and he wants to share it with you. He's doing something, and he's doing it well, and he's happy. He's not the president of IBM, no, but he's finding his way, and you help to inspire him. That's worth everything to me. To my students' parents, hello! I look forward to working with your child this school year. Let's begin the school year in the spirit of partnership and cooperation. I will believe half of what I hear about you, if you'll believe half of what you hear. I feel rewarded when a student who previously had all Fs shares his excitement with me and shows me a report card that has all Cs and above. I feel rewarded when a student who needed tremendous academic help the year before now can do almost all his work alone. I feel a sense of satisfaction when no one would know that a particular girl has Asperger's syndrome and poor social skills because she's sitting with her circle of friends group in the cafeteria. And I feel rewarded when my colleagues volunteer to join me in a learning team, reading a book to better help us understand the needs of behaviorally and academically disadvantaged students. Teaching allows me to be an important part of so many lives, to touch a future I will never see, to make a difference. I can't imagine any other career. The 2008 Nebraska Teacher of the Year. "16 years at Bancroft, led to several years teaching school on television. right here in Lincoln at Nebraska Educational Television Network. And perhaps it was that led to the Dean of the Teachers College approaching me, asking me to consider teaching full-time at your college, elementary education. I was thrilled. Until he told me that first I would have to go get a doctorate elsewhere, and then I was not thrilled. I said, thank you, I'll just return to the classroom, it's where I belong. And to my astonishment, I was hired. He said they'd been looking for someone with that kind of an attitude. And a wide breadth of experience. I had 24 wonderful years at your college, and I have many stories to share, but no time. So I will just leave you with a piece of advice. To be an authentic teacher, one must have intelligence, character, ability, imagination, and energy. One more time. To be an authentic teacher, one must have intelligence, character, ability, imagination, and energy. Plenty of the latter. You know, there's great irony in my ever even becoming an instructor of physical education. I was the sickliest child you ever saw. Skinny, round-shouldered, hollow-chested. If ever a flu or a bug went through town, I was sure to fall ill and to be the sickest person in town. I gave my parents many sleepless nights, I know. But I loved activity. I loved activity, and I think I knew intuitively that it was activity that was going to build me up and get me strong. And that is why when that English teacher tried to get me fired, oh, she shall remain nameless, Louise Pound. She wanted a return to the great intercollegiate athletics of her day. I was trying to build a strong intramural program, a program that would serve everyone, not just the athletically gifted girls, but the girls like me. An intramural program, and that is what we had. We had competitive sports, yes, but they were joyful, relaxing, bodybuilding, and healthful. And I'm proud to say that when I retired in 1952, 80% of the women students at UNL had participated in our intramural program. So I leave you with this. A department must serve everyone. Teachers must serve everyone. Just as a stream never rises above its source, so people can never rise above the level of the teachers of their children. If teachers are to serve properly, they must realize that the training and education they receive at the university is not wholly for what it may mean to them personally, but that they must take that back to the communities in the state and share with the people and the children there the benefits of university education. It is, therefore, the mission of this college to foster in those preparing to teach right professional attitudes and ideals, professional honesty, and the ideal that schools are maintained not for teachers, but for children. Frank Henslick. Okay, I told you my stars were Dorcas, Mabel, and one other. She was a country school teacher, and I think she can perhaps represent all those young country school teachers of yore who endured snakes and blizzards and outhouses, long walks across the prairie to get to work, boarding houses, salaries to laugh at, all to give other youngsters an education. She will represent all of those teachers. I've tried to keep my theme around that idea of courage, and I think that this last little country school teacher will solidify that. It was January 12th, 1888, and it wasn't even cold. No, all through the state. The morning was mild, it was lovely. It was strange that after weeks and weeks of winter, After weeks and weeks of snow, after weeks and weeks of freezing, temps of 10 and 20 below, well, yes, it was strange, but suddenly it was springtime on the range. January 12th, 1888, and kids will be kids, and they just couldn't wait to race outside, to run, to play, even though, yes, it was a school day. I don't need my jacket, and I don't need my hat. Look, Ma, it's sunny. How about that? I don't need my scarf or my gloves, not today. We'll even get recess outside, I'd say. I don't have a worry, and I don't have a care. Well, who could blame them on a day so rare? A day so rare. Minnie Mae Freeman, 19 years old, built up the fire, though it wasn't really cold, in a prairie sod schoolhouse by a river called the Loop, where she taught 16 kids, her own little troop. Taught them to read and to write and spell, arithmetic, history, geography as well. Taught them penmanship and literature too. Little ones, big ones, Minnie knew what to do. Minnie Mae Freeman, 19 years old, brought out the McGuffies, or so I'm told, on the morning of the 12th, when it wasn't even cold. First graders, page 19, second, 43, fourth and fifth show third, how nouns and verbs agree. Older boys and girls, your papers now I do. Jackson, please collect them and turn to 82. Don't look out the window, you know better, yes you do. Quiet please in class, we've got work to do. We've got work to do. And then around 11, the sky turned bleak, and the schoolhouse door began to rattle and creak, and the temperature went from sweet to mean, a drop-in temp like nobody'd seen, a drop-in temp of 18 degrees in 3 short minutes, if you please. But that was just a tease of what was to come. What was to come was a wall of white, rolling towards them with merciless might, rolling towards them a relentless howl, rolling towards them at 60 miles an hour, rolling towards them, but have no fear, said Minnie Mae Freeman, we're going to stay right here. We've got enough coal to last all night. If it comes to that, we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right. And then the door was off its hinges, and it skittered across the floor. Minnie and the boys put it back, but it tore off the hinges once more, so they nailed it shut, while the wind did roar around the little sod hut, while the wind did roar around the little sod hut. We've got enough coal, have no fear, we're going to sit out this storm, we're going to stay right here. We're going to stay right here. And then a gust from the heavens, no, it had to be hell, tore the tar paper roof off the soddy so well that it left a gaping hole, and in came the snow and the wind and the chills of 2 and 3 below. 2 and 3 below. A hole in the roof. Now you've got no choice. Minnie, stay calm, heed the inward voice. No amount of coal is going to warm your school now. You've got to get out, and you know how. The door is nailed shut, so the window is your door. Everybody out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 14, 15, 16, do just what I say. We're going to my boarding house, half a mile away. Just half a mile away. Half a mile of blizzard like never seen before. Not snow, but a powder of ice and grit and more. A strange killing powder like knives against the skin. A strange killing powder amidst an awful din. A strange killing powder sucking breath away, wiping out the world. But onward come what may. Onward come what may. Survivors of that storm have a few things to share. They talk of the suddenness, the shock, the blare. They talk of visibility, which was virtually none at all. They talk of mental confusion, the terror, the squall. A wind so strong, how can I stay upright? A snow so fierce, what's happened to my sight? A freeze so cold, can I really move at all? Will I ever live to tell of the greatest storm of all? The greatest storm of all. What happens to time when you battle nature's wrath, when your eyelids freeze shut on a non-existent path? What happens to a story of courage, pluck, and might from so very long ago? Well, things get quite embellished. According to some students, there was no rope that held them all together, their last and only hope. But it's also true that you could not see. All survivors say this. You could not see your hand, let alone your way. So how did it happen? Minnie got them all 16, to safety on that day. Several fell down, and Minnie went down too. But they got back up, no small feat to do, because they say Minnie died on that January day, because once down, well, down was where you stayed. Down was where you stayed. So they must have held hands, looped arms, bunched tight. They must have known instinctively that together there was might. They must have thought, we're strong, we can make it, that's the truth. They had the blessing of the cockiness of youth. How long did it take? No one will ever know. How long from school to house, through painful, blinding snow? How long to cups of soup and a blanket's warm embrace? How long before you realized it was luck, or chance, or grace? How long the prayer of thanks as a grateful parent cried? How long before they questioned, why me, when others died? And did the people wonder, was it luck or Minnie May who got our kids to safety on that most treacherous, cruel day? Well, one thing Minnie did that no one can dispute. Minnie acted quickly, chose her course, she was astute. She was only 19, but a general in a dress. There was only time for action, and that she did address. Because on January 12th, 1888, every minute counted, every minute held your fate. Minnie May Freeman didn't cry, didn't doubt, didn't wait, hesitate, didn't fret, got them out. Minnie May said later, a heroine, not me. I only did what anyone would do. We had to flee. But then it was renown, awards, tribute, fame, a song, a watch, a pension, and 80 proposals of marriage came. To Minnie May Freeman, 19 years old, who got her class to safety, got them to the fold, got remembered as a saint, a heroine young and bold, a tribute to all teachers, or so I'm told, because she marched into that blizzard saying, children, stay by me. Together we can make it. Together is the key. And that's a good life lesson we're still learning to this day. Together we can do so much. We can triumph come what may. So, thank you, Minnie May. You didn't want it, but we're sold. You're the heroine of that blizzard on the 12th, when it wasn't even cold. Thank you, teachers.
One of our dearest dreams was to have a really wonderful celebration of Teachers College. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. We have a wonderful Centennial Committee that worked very hard on all of this, and I'd like to ask any of the members of that committee who are here to please stand for a moment so we can say thank you. Some of them are here, and not all, but for those of you who aren't. Well, our evening is coming to a close. Following this presentation, you will receive a little booklet that will come from us that will be a very abbreviated history of Teachers College. There are two very lovely, well-written histories of Teacher College, the first 50 years and the second 50 years. And we have those in the office, and if there are any people who would like to have them in their full-blown form, we're very happy to share them. Otherwise, you will get a memento of sort of some highlights that will give you a sense of what has happened in these past 100 years. So I'd like to close this evening by saying thank you to every one of you for being here. I think it's very important that we recognize milestones. You know, our lives are so busy, and we're always so frantically moving to the next thing. And I think it's very critical that we sometimes pause and take a moment to recognize what has been accomplished. That's really part of the energy that helps us to keep going. And we really have accomplished a lot. I think there is a tremendous amount to be proud of at the University of Nebraska. It is really a wonderful place, and this is a wonderful, wonderful college. And it is a wonderful college, as Dean O'Hanlon said, because of the people and because of the traditions, and you are all part of that. So thank you all very much, and good night.